Have you ever felt like you're being pigeonholed? Like someone just slaps a label on you, and then suddenly everyone expects you to act a certain way.
Yeah, it can be super frustrating.
Right.
And it's something I hear from a lot of D&D players about the alignment system. Like, you pick lawful, good, chaotic, neutral, whatever, and then you feel like, oh man, now I have to always play this way. But is it really that limiting?
I think for a lot of people, it feels that way.
Yeah.
Like I was in a game recently, and a friend was playing a paladin. Super lawful good, always trying to do the right thing. But then we had this situation where following the rules would have meant sacrificing a bunch of innocent people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a classic D&D dilemma. What happened?
He was really torn up about it. He wanted to stick to his paladin code, but ultimately he chose to bend the rules a little to save those lives. And honestly, it was an amazing moment for his character.
Totally. Because it forced him to really grapple with that conflict between his ideals and just blindly following the rules. And those are the choices that make D&D so interesting. But it is funny you mention it feeling limiting, because the alignment system hasn't always been like it is now. It's gone through a ton of changes over the different editions of the game.
Really? I had no idea. Tell me more about that.
So back in the early days of D&D, alignment was a lot more about these huge cosmic forces, this whole battle of law versus chaos. It wasn't so much about your personal morality, more like which side are you going to pick in this giant cosmic war.
So like less about would my character lie to protect a friend, and more about are they going to team up with the forces of Ultimate Order or just go full chaos?
Yeah, exactly. And then when Advanced Dungeons & Dragons came around, they introduced the good and evil axis, and that's when personal morality started to become a bigger part of it. But even then, alignment was still mechanically pretty restrictive. Certain classes and spells were literally locked to certain alignments.
Oh, well. So you couldn't have like a chaotic good paladin, even if it made sense for your character.
Nope, not really. Everything was much more straightforward, maybe even a little predictable. But thankfully, things didn't stay that way.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound super fun for long.
Right. Later editions, especially starting with 3rd edition, started loosening things up. Alignment became more of a guideline instead of a hard rule.
Okay, so I'm guessing that's when things got a lot more interesting.
Absolutely. Because it opened up so many more possibilities for character development, for role-playing, and this is something that's continued in the current edition. And it's even more emphasized in 1 D&D, which is the newest version of the rules coming out next year. Alignment is now much more about why your character does things than just what they do.
So instead of my character eyes lawful good, therefore they must do X, it's more like my character eyes lawful good. So how would they approach this situation?
Exactly. It encourages you to really dig into their motivations, their values, what makes them tick. You're not just playing a stereotype, you're playing a whole person who's influenced by their alignment, but not completely defined by it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely a more nuanced way to approach things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's less about this is the box you fit in and more about, okay, let's explore all the shades of gray here. But this is where I think a lot of players, maybe DMs too, fall into those classic traps. Like the lawful stupid paladin or the chaotic random rogue.
Oh yeah, totally. Those are definitely the pitfalls. But I think it comes from misunderstanding what those alignments actually mean. Like, lawful doesn't have to mean blindly following every single rule, no matter how ridiculous.
Right. It could be about having a strong personal code, a sense of duty, or even just a really deep belief in fairness and justice.
Exactly. Imagine a lawful good character who's super dedicated to upholding the law, but also recognizes that sometimes the law itself is messed up or unjust. You know, that creates such an interesting conflict for them. Do they follow the rules even when they know it's wrong? Or do they try to change the system from within?
It's like that saying, just because something's legal doesn't make it right. There are tons of examples throughout history of people who challenged laws that were unjust, even if it meant breaking them.
Exactly. And on the flip side, chaotic doesn't have to mean just acting randomly or doing whatever pops into your head.
So it's not just about causing chaos for the sake of chaos.
Right. It can be about valuing freedom, individuality, challenging the status quo, you know?
Like a character who's fighting for personal liberty, even if it means going against authority or what society expects.
Exactly. Think about Robin Hood. Classic chaotic good character breaks the law. Yeah, but he does it to fight injustice, to help people in need.
Well, that's a perfect example. It really shows how alignment can be so much deeper than just follow these rules or do whatever you want.
Yeah.
But how do we as players and DMs move beyond those simple labels and make alignment more interesting in our games?
One way is to really focus on your character's ideals. What do they truly value? What are their goals? What are those lines they would never cross, no matter what?
So instead of saying, my character is chaotic neutral,
Yeah.
I might say, my character values freedom above everything else.
Yeah,
And they'll break any rule to protect it.
exactly. That gives you so much more to work with when you're role-playing, when you're making decisions in the game. Another approach is to think about faction-based morality.
Faction-based morality, what's that?
It's the idea that a character's morality is shaped by the group they belong to, their guild, their religion, their country, even just their adventuring party. These groups have their own codes of conduct, their own values, that might not line up with what we think of as good or evil in a general sense.
So a character's actions might seem weird based on their alignment, but they make sense if you understand the beliefs of their faction.
Exactly. Say you have a lawful evil character who's part of a powerful thieves guild. This guild has a strict code that all its members have to follow. One rule might be never betray another guild member. This character might lie, cheat, steal, whatever to get what they want, but they would never betray another member of their guild, even if it meant losing something themselves.
That's really interesting. It adds a whole new layer to the character. They're not just evil, they're loyal, at least to their own people.
Exactly. And it creates these awesome opportunities for conflict. What happens if the guild orders that character to do something they think is truly awful? Do they follow orders? Or do they risk being kicked out of the guild? Those kinds of dilemmas are what make for really great role-playing.
I can see how that would lead to some really cool stories. It's not just about good versus evil anymore. It's about all the gray areas in between.
And don't forget about the possibility for characters to change and grow over time, just like real people. Our D&D characters should be able to evolve too. Their experiences, their relationships, the choices they make. All those things should have an impact on their worldview, their values, and maybe even their alignment.
That's a great point. I think sometimes as players,
Yeah.
we get so attached to our character being a certain way that we forget that change is what makes stories good. It's what makes characters feel real.
For sure. Don't be afraid to let your character's alignment shift if it makes sense for their story. Maybe they go through something really traumatic that makes them question everything they believe in. Maybe a close friend betrays them and they lose faith in people. Or maybe they just spend years adventuring with people who have different values and it gradually opens their eyes to new ways of thinking. Whatever the reason, the change should feel natural, like it's a result of what the character has been through and the choices they've made.
That's definitely something we can all relate to. I know I wouldn't make the same choices now that I did when I was younger. And our D&D characters deserve that kind of depth too, you know? It makes them feel like more than just stats on a piece of paper.
Yeah,
It's like we're letting our characters grow up a little bit.
right. And honestly, that makes for a way more interesting game. Who wants to play a character that's just stuck in the same place forever?
Totally. Letting your characters change makes them feel more real, their choices mean more, and the whole game is just more exciting. It's about letting those characters breathe, you know?
And I bet it's more fun for the DM, too.
Oh, absolutely. When players are willing to go beyond just what their alignment says and actually make choices that feel real for their character,
Yeah.
it opens up so many more possibilities for the story. You get unexpected twists, tough decisions, consequences that actually matter.
I can just imagine how much cooler those gotcha moments would be, you know? When a player does something totally unexpected. Oh yeah, for sure. As a DM, you're not just responding to what you think they're gonna do. You're interacting with characters that can actually surprise you. Challenge your expectations. Make the story way more interesting and unpredictable.
It sounds like the way the alignment system has changed has been a good thing for D&D. It's moved away from just these basic categories and gotten so much more nuanced and interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. It lets players create characters that feel real and flawed and capable of being both heroic and morally complex. And it lets DMs create these awesome stories with tough choices and unexpected twists and consequences that really hit home.
Which is what makes D&D so great, right? It's not just rolling dice and fighting monsters. It's about exploring what it means to be human, even if those humans are elves and dwarves and tieflings.
Exactly. It's a game that at its best lets us explore these amazing worlds and also our own imaginations and all the complicated things about what it means to be a person, and that's really powerful.
Couldn't have said it better myself. This has been a super fascinating look at D&D alignment and how it's changed over time. You've definitely given me a lot to think about, not just as a player, but just in how I think about morality in general.
Glad to hear it. It's always fun to dig into these topics and see how they connect to the bigger picture.
Before we go, I want to give a huge shout out to LitRPG Reads and author Paul Bellow. Their work on these concepts has been so insightful, and I highly recommend checking them out if you're interested in learning more about alignment and how to use it to make your D&D games even better.
Definitely. They've done some amazing work helping us understand alignment and how it can make the game so much richer.
And to all our listeners out there, we want to hear from you. Have you ever felt limited by the alignment system in your games? Or have you found cool ways to use it to create characters that feel really deep and complex? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We'd love to keep this conversation going.
And remember, the best D&D stories come from characters who make you think, not just act the way you expect. Alignment is a tool, not a cage. Use it to create something amazing. Don't let it hold you back.